Hi everyone, welcome back to our ongoing series on creating a life operating system in Notion. Today is a really important one. So today we're going to look at the alignment zone, which is one of the two most important dashboards in the entire system. I told you previously when we did the action zone dashboard that was one of the two most important, and now this is the other one. The entire intention and design of the system is to emphasize two things: focus and alignment. Focus so that as you're working hour to hour, day to day, you're focused exclusively on what matters. The big question is always, what matters now? And so we have the action zone dashboard to focus on what matters at any given minute, hour, or day. It focuses like a laser beam on that and removes all distractions so you can get the work done. The other half of the design intention of this whole system is alignment. And alignment is all about making sure that that task or that action item you're working on is the right item. It's the right thing to be focused on at that moment, the most important thing you can be doing at that moment, and that everything you're doing minute to minute, hour to hour, and day to day is aligned with your larger aspirations and goals, the bigger vision of where you want your life to go and who you want to become. So the whole purpose of the alignment zone is to make sure all those tasks are the right tasks and that they're advancing the projects that you've set as priorities, the goal outcomes you've identified as the things you want to accomplish, the life pillars that you've established as the cornerstones and the things that need to be done to make your life work, and ultimately the guiding principles of your life, which are all laid out in the alignment zone under the pillar to pipeline pyramid, which we're going to get into in just a second. And then the other part of the alignment zone is the review sessions. We're not going to get into that today, but we're going to do that very soon because that is essential. That's what makes the alignment zone work, is the periodic reviews, weekly, monthly, and if you choose quarterly, but at least weekly and monthly, and then annually for a big assessment of the alignment. And just a heads up of what's to come. Today we're getting an overview of the alignment zone, but after that we're going to go section by section and do a separate video going deep into each component of the alignment zone. And those components will include the weekly, monthly review, the review sessions, the projects database, the goals database, and the pillars database. So let's dive in. Okay, so here we are in the alignment zone. And as you can see in the upper left, let me make it a little bit larger for you. In the upper left corner, this is the third dashboard in my favorites. So you can see the command center is first, which we did a video on in the very beginning. The action zone is all about focus, and the alignment zone is where we do alignment. Just a quick update to underline the point I just made about focus and alignment. I've renamed the first column in the command center to focus and alignment. Previously, it was just focus. This first column is the quick links to the most important dashboards for achieving focus and alignment, which primarily means the action zone and the alignment zone. The others are supporting those efforts. So back to the alignment zone. So just a quick note to simplify a little bit. On the very bottom, we see these execution dashboards. Disregard that. Those are just quick links to the action zone and to relevant dashboards that let me execute after I've done the alignment. But these are not essential and not part of the alignment zone itself. The alignment zone is everything above that execution dashboard's line. And it starts with an insight area, and then it goes into the pillar to pipeline pyramid. We'll talk about all this in a second, but I just want to give you an overview of what we're achieving here. At the very bottom, you'll see the action items. That is the task database. We did a video entirely on that database. So that's the action items that we're already familiar with. I just point that out so that you can get a reference point. As we go up the pillar to pipeline pyramid, we're going through the execution pipelines, then the goal pipelines, then the life pillars. This is a pyramid because the pillars are the narrowest and the top level items that everything is in support of. And they're also the fewest. Down at the bottom, we have the action items, which are the most numerous. That's the highest quantity, the smallest unit of work broken down, so you can have a lot of them. Immediately above that, we have the projects. The projects are the next smallest unit of work, but they are, of course, more consolidated than tasks and action items because projects are broken down into many tasks or action items. You could, of course, have action items that are not part of a task. Those would be quick to-dos that would just come in separately. We saw that in the flowchart. But for the most part, the action items are supporting projects and moving you closer to completing the projects. And those two together are what I call the execution pipelines, the projects and the action items. Then we have, in the middle of the pyramid, the goal pipeline. The goal pipeline has two types of goals, and we're going to break this down into more detail, but the goal outcomes, which are the measurable results that you want to achieve, the goals you want to complete that you can measure and see your progress toward. and the value goals. These are the things that are softer and more aspirational. Then above that, we have the life pillars. The life pillars, again, we're going to get into this, and these are the ongoing elements of your life that keep the roof up, keep the lights on, keep things functioning. If these collapse, your life will be in chaos. So you need to keep these moving. And every one of the goals and every one of the projects, and then by default, and every one of the action items is in support of at least one of the life pillars. So everything will flow up there. And typically you'll want to link those through the relations. Then looking at the top, we have the insight area. And this is sort of the pinnacle of the self-reflection you do at the outset to understand who you are, where you want to go, and who you want to be. So having done a quick summary from the bottom, we're now going to work our way down from the top in a little bit more detail. So the first thing here is the guiding principles. The guiding principles are exactly what they sound, the guiding principles of your life. And these are the result of a process you go through where you really reflect on what matters to you in life, what you want to become, what your aspirations are. And you need to go through this reflection because this is the North Star. This is where you want to go with your life. If you don't have a very clear sense of what matters to you, what you value, what's important, what you want to achieve, and why you want to achieve it, then the system is just operating without any direction. This is the sharpest point of the direction for the entire system. And so this is the result of a process. I'm going to show you what I got to after going through a process of self-reflection and self-assessment. The way you get to this very clear, tightly articulated endpoint is by going through a reflection process. Very similar to if you've seen some of those annual reviews, the year-end review and the year beginning planning, that's essentially what you want to do, but you don't need to do it at year end. You can do it any time of year, and at the point you're starting to build a new system is the perfect time to do it because your system has to be aligned to that identity, that sense of who you are and who you want to become. It has to be aligned behind that. So if you didn't do a year-end review or haven't done some kind of major self-assessment recently, then I would suggest before you even build the system, you go through that process. And I'll talk a little bit about that, but I'll also point you in the right direction in the show notes below as to where you might be able to find resources to walk through that self-assessment process and that vision process of defining the vision for where you want your life to go. Just so you have a sense of what you're trying to achieve with that process, I have four elements here that are the culmination of my self-assessment process. And it's at the top, it's the sharpest, most pointed, most definite. In the bottom, it's more abstract, but more foundational to sort of who I believe I am and what matters to me. So at the top, we have the guiding principles, central elements. Central elements ultimately come to a single word, which is what I call the state of being. In my case, I've decided the state of being right now in my life is rising. I want to improve. I want to climb. I want to grow. I want to rise, both with my life and my relationships and my business. And the process through which I get there is, as I mentioned before, focus and alignment. My system is all about focus and alignment. My process, my work habits, everything is all about focus and alignment. Either it's about zeroing in on what matters or aligning that action with the priorities in my life. That's how I determine what matters at any given moment. So I have the three different categories that are priorities in my life: family, business, and health. Yours may be different. Yours may be the same. I mean, for a lot of people, family, business, and health are a pretty good starting point, if not an ending point. But you might have other categories, spiritual or whatever else is a priority in your life. Just an example of what this would include. Again, this is very sharp, very succinct. This is the end of an assessment process. But more time per day, MTPD is my business. I want to launch products. I want to expand. I want to grow my customer base. I want to improve financial results. So these are pretty common things for business, but let's write them out with clear intention of what we want to achieve in business. But the other part is a big change for me. I want to be more active in engagement and communication with a community. And that's one of the things I'm doing with this video series. It's something I'm doing with other writing I'm doing with my newsletter. My newsletter is growing like crazy. I am really committed to it. I'm pouring myself into it. I feel in many ways that's my best outpour of thoughts and reflections. So if you haven't subscribed, I would encourage you to. I give away free Notion templates to anyone who subscribes. The link is below. But you see here, that's a priority. So I'm committing a lot of time and effort to crafting the best newsletter I can possibly craft and sharing it with as many people as I can. And YouTube, which is what I'm doing here, I'm also doing it on the Mind and Machine YouTube channel and podcast. LinkedIn, I haven't quite started, but I'm going to start sharing a lot of business content on LinkedIn. And Medium, I've barely begun, but I plan to bring a lot of the concepts from this video series, not so much focused on Notion, but about system design and personal enhancement and personal performance systems to my Medium column. So that's pretty simple. That's the simplest, most tactical up here at the top, the central elements. Then we go to drive and motivation. What drives me or what drives you as you build your system? You got personal and family. Everybody should have that. I toggled it off just because I didn't want to share that. But deep satisfaction of creating something worthwhile. That's one of the things that drives me. I get such a rewarding feeling creating things that resonate with people, like I'm doing here and like I do with Mind and Machine. And that's one of my drives, one of the things that motivates me. The thrill of discovery, finding new things. Doing this, I talk to new people, I hear new ideas. You put ideas out in the world and they'll be challenged and new twists will evolve. Just by being engaged, you will discover new things. And that's one of the things that motivates me. Curiosity, it's always been a driving factor for me. And desire for elegant design and intrinsic fit, systems and aesthetics. I find systems to be an aesthetic thing in many cases. Systems can be a thing of beauty. But I also love art. I love creating art. I like experiencing other people's art. And obviously systems is something that I'm into. So I've clearly defined it up front here. Let's come down a little bit. Purpose and why. This is my why. You got to ask, why do you do what you do? What's the why behind it? Purpose behind your actions and your aspirations. Again, you should have a section on family. One of my whys is to have an impact on others at scale through life-enhancing ideas and inspiring aesthetics. Again, this echoes the one above. Systems are one of the kinds of ideas that I've been sharing a lot lately. Aesthetics. I want my systems to be elegant and aesthetically designed, but I also, other types of aesthetics. I do a lot of creative stuff, not professionally anymore. I used to do artistic endeavors professionally. Now I do them just as a passion, something I love, but I love sharing them and creating them. So I've defined that as something that I'm striving toward. Life experiences that touch the root of being, those experiences that just feel so profound and meaningful. Those are clearly articulated here as one of my purposes and whys. And when you hear other people do their reflections and come out with responses, if this resonates with you, take these. If this speaks to you, what I'm defining here, use these, or come up with your own. It doesn't matter whether others are using it, because some of these are things that a lot of people will connect with. And so, look at different people's reviews. There are a lot of YouTube videos on annual reviews. See what people have gone through, what conclusions they've come to, what ideas they've discovered, and see if that resonates with you. And finally, and this is the most important one, because this sort of goes to the essence of who you see yourself as. And so foundational core, that's what it's called. That's the bottom one. And that's, I think, really the most important one. You write out a few lines of what defines who you are. So I'll just share this with you. This changes periodically, perhaps once a year, perhaps every 6 months. Whenever part of your reviews will be checking in on this and reminding yourself of these things. And when you feel you've drifted away from it, change it. Change it then, or set a time aside to change it later. So some of these foundational core elements that I've defined for myself are: experience the deepest threads of life through the most capable mind and body I can create. Your mind has to be clear, your body has to be healthy in order to do anything else. So that's a priority. And that enables me to have these deep life experiences that I'm pursuing. Maximally love and support the people I'm closest to. So the family, the ones that are really close to you. I think everyone needs to have a statement about how they feel and how they want those relationships to be. And then empower broader circles of people with as much impact as possible. And that's exactly what I'm doing here with my YouTube channel, with my podcasts, with my writing, with all the things I do. I want to have impact beyond my immediate family, and that's, reaching out. Of course, you can't have the same level of impact with the people a little bit further out in the rings of closeness. But you want to have impact, and you want to have these rings, like a splash in the water sends rings out further and further with different levels of intensity as it gets further out. But the ripples go out far. And to me, that's really profound. And that is something that is at the core of what I'm trying to achieve. Then embrace, foster, and champion mindful, thoughtful, caring, and artistic values. Be courageous, stay true. I want to have a sense of honor in what I do. I want to be true to myself. I want to be true to people that I work with and that I interact with. I want to be courageous. You want to do bold things. You want to take risks. And if that's something you want to do, you want to define it here. It's important to define the things and be very intentional and deliberate about what you're setting out to do. And finally, create maximum value and be useful. I think everybody should in some way strive to offer value and be useful. And I think it's important to write that down. So if you don't write it down, it doesn't feel as real. It doesn't feel as important. And you can't make it part of your periodic cyclical reviews to go back and check in on it if you don't write it down. So Notion creates a great platform to write that down, document it, and revisit it on a regular basis. So that's the guiding principles, and that's in orange. Then these pillars and pipelines down here are also in orange because the guiding principles is really the point of the pyramid, and then the life pillars and the goal pipeline and the execution pipelines. Now, we're going to come back to the two yellow ones. So the pillars are what everything is in support of, and you want to have a fairly small, tightly defined group, but it needs to cover everything in your life that's important, everything that has aspects that need ongoing maintenance, that need work done at some point. It needs to be defined here. So I have organized these by 3 categories: growth, business, and home/life. And you'll notice, if you remember the command center, aside from the focus and alignment, we had 3 categories: growth, business, and home life. So I want to point that out because there were some questions originally. If I'm organizing this by the pillars, pipelines, and vaults system, why do we not sort it by pillars, pipelines, and vaults? It's because pillars and pipelines and vaults are about the assets and organizing in folders the assets in Notion, the databases and the pages. It's more of just a practical thing to keep the side dashboard organized. But what matters is the life pillars. And these are the 3 categories of life pillars. Remember, all the projects, goals, tasks, all are in service of at least one life pillar. So these are the 3 categories of pillars. That's how we've defined it, because pillars are the pinnacle of the whole pyramid and of everything you're trying to achieve. They are all organized in one of these 3 categories. So back here, looking at the actual pillars, and we're going to do a video on pillars, so we're not going to go too deep here, but you'll see it's things like learning, health and fitness in the growth area. Business would have client execution, branding, audience. Business admin, sales and marketing, product development. Personal and home life would then have personal admin, family, and home. So we're going to come back to that. We're going to go into the details of all this, but just know that everything is in support of the pillars, in some way tagged and has a relation to the pillars. Just quickly here, pillar support are the things in your system that are delivering on the pillars, but are not tasks or not projects. So projects and tasks are pipelines that have very specific items moving through. Not everything is in a pipeline, and these are just the habits and routines, the mindset and health and fitness. These are the categories that support the pillars. Again, we're going to go deeper into this, but habits and routines are laid out in a database, which I view in table form, and every one of them is related to a pillar, at least one, in some cases more than one. And we're going to do a video on that, but that gave you a little glimpse there. Mindset and identity sculpting is part of my morning routine. We'll also do a video after this on morning routine and how everything in the Notion system is started up each day, because there is a process, and the morning routine is very much about engaging with and jumpstarting each day the Notion system. But mindset and identity sculpting is just a page, but it's a collection of things that either inspire me or bring wisdom that I don't want to forget, so I revisit it on a regular basis. You see, I have a lot of categories. Just a quick glance, we're going to go through these and do a whole video on these, but it's a long list of things I've come across. I've collected them from all over the internet, from interactions with people, from trainings I've done, from books I've read, from articles I've come across, podcasts. When I hear a piece of wisdom that I want to internalize and I want to really make it part of who I am, I will add it to these organized sections within my mindset and identity sculpting. Then I have another section, as you see, after remember. Remember are things that inspire me or share wisdom that I want to revisit frequently, so I internalize it and I know it at a really visceral level. And so I will, so each morning in my morning routine, I'll spend a little time doing mindset. And that means I'll go to a section in here. And since it's such a big page with so many different sections, it doesn't get boring. I'm revisiting different parts and different times and jumping around to what I feel sort of interested in exploring that day. But it's reminding me of the things that I don't want to forget, the lessons, the ideas, the wisdom, the aspirations that I want to keep close to. And then identity is ultimately we want to become someone who's more capable than ourselves. We have goals and aspirations. And in most cases, we are not achieving those. Why are we not? Because we are not the person who's capable of achieving those, but we are capable of becoming the person who can achieve those goals and aspirations. So if something seems impossible, it just seems out of reach, you don't know how to do it, well, you don't know how to do it. You are not the person who can do that right now. And if you were, you probably would have done it by now. But you can become the person who can do it. And that is what the focus is on a lot of the system elements, is growing and learning and shaping yourself so you can become the kind of person that can achieve the goals you want to achieve. And the mindset and identity sculpting is part of that. Identity sculpting is, first of all, knowing what kind of person you want to be. And second of all, visualizing it and internalizing it so you believe you can be and you are on your way to being the kind of person who can achieve the goals and aspirations you've set out for yourself. So again, a whole video on that coming. And then I track my health and fitness and what I'm doing there. So this is just a demo page I put together to show a little bit more diversity than the kind of workouts I've been doing. We'll do a whole video on health and fitness tracking. And if you wanted to track your nutrition, if that were a priority to you, then you could set up another database that tracks your nutrition, pulling data from an app that probably tracking calories or however you want to approach it. But that's in support of the pillars. So it's part of that life pillar category. So the goal pipeline is in the middle of the pyramid. I have two kinds of goals. Again, I'm going to do a whole video on goals and talk more about the two types of goals and how they relate. But very simply, I'll open both of these. And one of the reasons I like this layout is I can open any two toggles and look at how they relate and how they connect. And we'll do more of that as we go into these subcategories. Essentially, the difference between goal outcomes and value goals. The reason I break it into two when most systems just have one goal category is that goal outcomes are what you need to have to track results and to track progress and to hold yourself accountable for moving toward it or not, and knowing if you're failing to move toward it. So very specific measurable goal outcomes are really important. But I find if I just start trying to think of goal outcomes, it feels very transactional. It feels shallow. It doesn't feel like it's going to the deep root of the goals I feel I have. And for me, it's easier to break it into two steps and start with very soft, abstract value goals based on my values. So it'd be things like, I want to have a thriving business. Now, you can't measure or quantify whether you're succeeding at moving towards a thriving business. I mean, you can have a sense, but you can't really know when you have achieved it. It's a moving target in a lot of ways. Or I want to have extraordinary knowledge in my field. Again, not measurable, not trackable, but important. And it's something that speaks to me at a deep level, the idea of having that kind of extraordinary knowledge in the fields that are important to me. Solid, growing financial footing, that's important for everyone, but that's not a specific goal outcome. That is a goal based on things that I value. So to me, it's a lot easier to start just writing down these softer, more intrinsically motivated aspirations as my value goals. And then I define goal outcomes that are more specific and measurable and trackable. And every one of the value goals has a goal outcome attached to it. Every one of the goal outcomes has a value goal attached to it. They are directly linked. One is measuring the progress and the results and identifying when you've achieved it. The other is something you're reaching and aspiring for, and is more of an emotional or aspirational quality or value that you've defined for yourself. In both cases, you want to be very deliberate and very intentional about it. We're going to do a whole video getting into those databases in more detail and describing how they're connected. And then we have the execution pipelines on the bottom. This is where you make things happen. So we've defined our goal outcomes. Then we have our projects, which are designed to move us towards achieving our goal outcomes. Every goal outcome must have a project or it's not progressing. And at the way these tables are laid out, at a glance, you can see whether or not every goal outcome has projects laid out and connected with relations, so you know it's moving forward. If you see one without a project or any tasks, then you've got a problem, and it's very clear to you, you need to bring a project online that's going to help move toward it, or you need to turn it to an inactive state. Each of these have a status, and they're either designated as underway, not started, complete, or archived. And only the ones that are underway are the ones you're monitoring and tracking. If you think of some outcome you'd like to achieve, but you don't have time right now, you don't have the bandwidth, you can enter it in the database and just tag it as not started. But it's there, and during your either monthly or quarterly reviews, you'll review whether it's time to start them or not. You'll see what the priorities are and what you have bandwidth to pursue. So of the goal outcomes that are activated, they will all have projects attached that you haven't begun, but it's something you'd like to do at some point, and you didn't want to forget about it, so you put it in the queue. On hold means you started it, but then for some reason you needed to put it on hold. You had too much going on, something came up, something changed, and the project you had started is no longer something you want to have actively underway. You don't have the bandwidth or whatever. Maybe you're waiting on something to happen before you get to it. You put it on hold. But if it started, it goes on hold. If it has never started and it's not ready to go, it's awaiting. Someday maybe is, exactly what it says. Something you might want to get to. It's not for sure, but you don't want to forget about it. You want to consider it as you look at options when you bring new projects online. In every case, the project is serving a goal outcome. We've got the goal outcomes list here. Every single one of them has to be serving a goal outcome, just like every single goal outcome needs a project assigned to it in order to make it move forward. And then projects attached to action items. And similarly, every single project that is in progress, meaning it has a status designation of in progress, must have action items. If you see an empty cell under action items for an in-progress project, you know that project has stalled, it's orphaned, it's hit a dead end, it's not moving anywhere. You must have at least one action item assigned to each in-progress project. And we're going to do very soon a video all in the projects database. And then action items. Now you'll see here, not all the action items have pillars, projects, goal outcomes assigned. This is a bit discretionary. Now, all of these are serving a pillar, but sometimes it's just not worth the time to enter all of the tags in the database. So I will always enter the due date, the DO date, as we talked about in the task database video, and I'll assign a priority. Other than that, nothing is required. But for bigger tasks, bigger action items, I will assign a pillar and a project. And that's important because then when I pull up the projects page, it'll have all the tasks listed that are underway for it. So if they're significant, I'll tag the projects and the pillars. If they're just quick, small things, then I won't do that. But at a glance, it lets me know what's aligned with what, especially for the tasks that are important, that are more significant. But more importantly, at the project level, at a glance, I can see what's happening, what's moving, what does and does not have tasks assigned, so I know what needs tasks assigned to it. Then moving up, we know if the goal outcomes are progressing. The value goals just go along with the goal outcomes. So you can see all of this is aligned from these guiding principles to the life pillars, to the goals, to the projects and action items. Now, the only thing left here is underneath Insight, we have two categories. Very important is the cycles toggle. These are the review cycles. We've got the daily tracking. We did a video already on daily tracking. Daily Insight is the daily tracking. It shows all that data that we track every day to evaluate our progress on the key metrics that we've identified that are important to move toward our goals, our pillars, and our guiding principles. We have a whole video on that. If you haven't seen it, that's available. But that's the daily track record. Next, we have the weekly insights and then the quarterly and monthly insights. The weekly insights are the weekly reviews. The monthly insights are the monthly reviews, and the quarterly insights are the quarterly reviews. And the annual plan and insight is the annual review. You don't have to do the quarterly review. We'll talk about this more. It's optional. That's my smallest one. It takes less than 15 minutes, so it's an option. We're going to get into that in more detail. But you must have at least a weekly and monthly review to make the system work. And what happens is at the end of the week, you can set a time on Friday night, Saturday night, or Sunday night. I'll usually assign the time for late Friday. If I don't get to it, I'll get to it Saturday or Sunday. I have a rule that if I haven't done it over the weekend, it must be the first thing I do Monday morning. But it's extremely important. We're going to do a whole video on this, but each of these is a weekly entry. Obviously, you can see by the name, this is a week. And each of these is a process of reviewing the week and evaluating what worked, what didn't work, and what needs to be queued up in the daily action zone from the task database for the upcoming week. That's when you prioritize the week's objectives. We're going to do a whole video on that, like I said, but just know this is an essential part of the process, the weekly review. Now, this is designed to be quick, and I'll show you how we do it fairly quickly. I get this done within a half hour, usually 20 minutes, but usually not more than 30 minutes unless I want to dive in deeper on something, which again, we'll get to in our review video. The quarterly and monthly insights, we have quarterly database and we have a monthly database. Each has a page and a record for each quarter and for each month. And you will open up each of these records to go in and do the review. And that review will provide a lot of insight, a lot of information. And in the process of that review, part of it is assigning database fields that you can compare and track over time. And part of it then in the page beneath it is a checklist that has you go through step by step the entire procedure of reviewing your guiding principles, reviewing your pillars, reviewing your goals, reviewing your projects, making sure the ones that should be active are active and the ones that shouldn't be are not, that every goal outcome has a project, all projects have action items. It is in the weekly review checklist that you check all of those. You check the projects, you check the goal outcomes, you check the pillars, and you check the guiding principles. And you do anything else that needs to be routinely achieved on a weekly basis, like pay your bills, for example, or clean out your downloads folder. All that stuff is in the checklist in either the weekly or monthly review. And in the video on these reviews, I will tell you what I think should be done in the weekly reviews, what should be done in the monthly reviews, and if you want to do a quarterly review, what you can do there. But you're allocating stuff that's unique to each, so there's no redundancy between them. So they're not huge, monstrous tasks doing these reviews. It's always about 20, 30 minutes, once a week, once a month, and you're keeping it simple. So the things you do in the weekly review, you're never going to do in the monthly review. And the things in the monthly review, you're not going to do in the quarterly review. They're each unique checklists so that you're not duplicating and just spinning your wheels on the same thing over and over. They're designed to be fast. They're designed to be important. They're designed to make sure nothing is straying and falling out of line. These reviews are what keep the train on the track. These are what keep you moving toward the guiding principles. So the three most important things of the entire system, I would say, are the action zone, the alignment zone, and the review cycles. Then at the bottom, I have some quick links to dashboards like the action zone, the content production machine that take me there quickly. Obviously, we'll go through all this stuff. I've seen some requests for the content production machine. That's one of the templates available, as is the daily action zone. And we're going to do a whole video on the content production machine as well as business and mind expansion, everything. So it's all coming. So that's the overview of the alignment zone. The next videos to come are going to be the review cycles, the project database, the goals databases, and the pillars section. So we're going to get deep into all that. So there you have more essential components to the Life operating system in Notion. If this is of interest, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to get updates on future videos. Leave thoughts or questions below and hit like if you found it valuable. I also write a newsletter called Mind and Machine on increasing human capability. I give away several of my best Notion templates to anyone who subscribes to the newsletter. You can, of course, unsubscribe at any time, but I hope you'll give it a chance. I work super hard to pack it with a lot of valuable insight. It's one of my top priorities. The newsletter link is also below in the show notes. Thanks for watching. Lots more to come.